panel meeting. The meeting is webcasted, so just for your information. We will start off with introductions today. I'm Councillor Mohammed Iqbal from Leeds. I'll be chairing the panel meeting. Can I pass on to the Police and Crime Panel support team and we can go around for introductions? Thank you.
Samantha Wilkinson, Police and Crime Panel Officer. Sharon Fraser, Legal Advisor to the panel. Nicole Share, Police Council.
Modern Tenant, King Wakefield Council.
Trevor Lake, Independent Member.
Joe Sykes, Independent Member. Sarah Courtney, Colvdale Council. Councillor Amanda Carter, Leeds.
Councillor Paul Sullivan, Bradford.
Councillor Mark Thompson, Councillor in Birkenshire and Bursley.
Councillor Sophie Whittaker, Colvdale. Wendy Stevens, Research Manager for the Police and Crime Team. Catherine Johnson, Assistant Chief Officer, West Yorkshire Police.
John Roberts, Chief Officer, West Yorkshire Police.
Liz Newman, Chief Superintendent, West Yorkshire Police. Philip Child, Inspector, Staff Officers in the Chief Officer.
Alan Restructuring Strategy Communications Policing, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Alison Lowe, Deputy Mayor, Policing and Crime. Tracy Braden, Mayor of West Yorkshire.
Thank you. Okay, and we'll start the formal meeting now. Apologies for absence. We've got Councillor Tariq Sam.
We've got apologies from Councillors Carl Burke, Richard Dunbar, Tariq Hussain and Jackie Williams.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes from meeting of 12th of November. Can we approve the minutes and pick up any matters arising from them?
Moving Chair.
Thank you. Somebody to second? Thank you, Sarah. Mark, Paul, did you want to make the comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, on the question of being people pleading guilty or not guilty, I made a comment on the last meeting which the Deputy Mayor asked me to go back and get the evidence. Well, I have done from the Commons Library. Apparently, the 37% of defendants from Bain groups pleaded not guilty compared with 27% of white defendants. This is from the Lama report, which I'll be happy to forward to you for your consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, I can't remember what the question was, but I think there was a bigger question asked about why is it that all black people seem to be the ones who are getting arrested. I can't really remember the question you asked, but I know that in China less black people get convicted than white people, but more black people than white get stopped and searched.
Okay, but you'll send the information?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, any urgent items? No urgent items. Item 4, declaration of members' interest. Trevor?
Thanks, Chair. Just to be clear that I'm still Chair of the Joint Independent Audit Committee in relation to the item on the medium-term financial plan.
Thank you. That takes us on to item 5, the P report, which has been sent to all the panel members. Very pleasing report. I think Paul was on the
Yes, I'd just like to congratulate the Chief and the force in general. It seems an excellent report, perhaps one of the best in the country, and I'd like to pay particular tribute to the girls and boys on the ground in blue. I use that phrase advisedly because I used to be one, and I know family and friends still on the force, and the very real difficulties, particularly with COVID, and congratulations all round.
Thank you, Paul. So we'll do the good bit first. Congratulate and appreciate the hard work by the police and your team. And Mayor, do you want to now talk about it?
I would like to add my congratulations to the Chief Constable and to every single officer and member of staff who has contributed to this exceptionally pleasing, positive report. And if I could, if I may, Chair, just also thank Daniel Broderick, Richard Knowles, Liz Brooke and Anne Dutton, who have done us proud by winning the National Police Federation Bravery Award. You may know the terrible incident outside Thornton Ross, where when I was a Member of Parliament, my constituent Robert Wilson was killed by two young men, and these officers went in a very volatile situation, putting themselves up in the firing line and in harm's way, and disarmed these young men. I just think they've done us proud, and I'm really pleased that this also balances out with the Peel report that you will all have had a look at, and I think it's fair to say we are one of the best in the country, and being a mayor and police and crime commissioner, being able to work with such a fantastic force who really do understand how we can work in partnership is hopefully a relationship that will continue to deliver for the people of West Yorkshire. So thank you, Chair. Alison, I don't know if you'd like to add your thanks.
Yeah, and as the Chief Constable knows, I'm absolutely delighted at the recent HYCFRS Peel report. I don't think we're one of the best in the country. I think we are the best in the country, because I spoke to HYCM before, who told me that himself. And I think it's worth saying it again and again, because the police here in West Yorkshire, they get more than their fair share of criticism. We know that assaults for all policing are up, and that's the same here in West Yorkshire. They're not always appreciated in the way that they should be, and despite that, the results from the Peel inspection are that our officers and staff are outstanding, and we should remember that, and I hope that when the people of West Yorkshire really understand what this means for them and for the legitimacy, efficacy, efficiency of the police, that they will be a bit kinder, a bit calmer, a bit more grateful for the police force we've got here in West Yorkshire. I personally want to pay tribute to all our police force, staff and officers, and to thank them for their bravery day in, day out, and to congratulate the Chief Constable deservedly for this outstanding result.
If I may add, Chair, that does not make us complacent, and we will be doing our job, holding the Chief Constable to account where we see there is work that needs to be done. So rest assured, your concerns will be my concerns, and we will be the voice of the people of West Yorkshire to continually challenge to go even better, to deliver even more for the people of West Yorkshire.
Yeah, well, I could not say it in better words than Alison and Mayor. So, Chief Constable, we appreciate the work, hard work your force has done. It's not an easy job, it's a very difficult job, and we all congratulate you and appreciate the work you have done in difficult times as well. And don't forget, we will not get complacent, we will scrutinise and do our job as well. We'll continue to do that to make our force even better. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Also want to add my congratulations to the Chief Constable and all of his team. They have done an absolutely cracking job, in particular in disrupting serious crime. And I know that officers just 4 miles from me have been tackling knife crime, and they have tackled armed men in the middle of Leeds with machetes and stopped a very serious incident happening with the public, so congratulations to each and every one of you. However, I'd be failing in my duty if I didn't bring to the attention of the Deputy Mayor the two adequate findings in the Peel report, and ask how she is going to try to hold the Chief Constable to account over these two. Thank you.
Rest assured, we will be reaching for outstanding in every area, and I know that the Chief Constable has projects in place and is thinking about how to deliver further in those areas. It won't go amiss.
I should just add that one of the advocates was reduced, requires improvement last time around, so actually the advocate doesn't properly reflect the progress that's been made. So clearly it's great that we get outstanding across the board. Today is about celebrating the success, and obviously we'll learn the lessons and understand where we can be better tomorrow. But today it's glory days, and let's all bask in the reflected glory of West Yorkshire, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor. Sarah, did you want to make a comment?
Thank you. Yeah, obviously adding my congratulations and to all staff, people on the ground, people on the ground, people in the back office, everyone plays a part, and that's fantastic. Yeah, so I suppose, and this isn't detracting. This is about perceiving the excellence that's there and striving for, perfection. Because I think, and I'm really glad to hear both Alison and Tracy, talk about the fact that we're not going to be complacent and that we are going to sort of continue to strive for excellence. And I suppose you've answered one of the questions already, saying that one of the areas of adequate was known about and was being worked on. And I suppose it's just that if you're in school governance, you have to do a self-assessment and know where your weak points are. So just to sort of reassure us that you know where the weak points are, that you are working on those, so that we can all look forward to having a sort of like a full outstanding on every level at some point in the future. So it's just about reassurance around the fact that you do sort of like self-assessments on those sort of issues, and that those are being worked on. Which I'm sure they are, but I just have to do due diligence and ask that question.
Awesome.
Yes, so we're delighted to know that the police have got to respond to the people assessment, and so to our office. So we have got to give a report back to HMIC FRS, reassuring them that we've taken cognizance of the recommendations, because there are recommendations in the report, and we've got to start to outline how we are beginning to hold the force to account for those elements of recommendation in the report. But the force will be responding to the areas of challenge, and so will we. And you'll get copies of that, and they're all on the website.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Joe Sykes, did you want to make a comment or question?
Yeah, and absolutely not to detract from the positivity of this report. It's great news, and obviously that has a great impact on the people of West Yorkshire. But in amongst those recommendations, there's one that I'm sure is of increased concern to yourselves around ensuring that information shared with children's social care organisations about vulnerable children, that are full pictures provided. I appreciate you'll be acknowledging that in your response to the inspectors, but I think as a panel we'd like more information on that at a future date, and the work that's happening in partnership, because the sharing of information around children to protect and safeguard them is obviously something that's close to everybody, and not something we'd want to fail on.
Of course, that goes without saying. But if I could just pick up on your earlier comment, and I think this is really helpful for morale as well, and it will help with our recruitment and with our ambitions for recruitment, to work for a force that is outstanding, that is exceptional leadership. You want to work with that organisation, so I'm hoping that this will really help with trust from communities, with making sure we have that diverse recruitment, that this is a force that understands its community and reflects its community. So this is a positive day for West Yorkshire Police.
Okay. Thank you. So, yeah, the whole panel unanimously acknowledges the hard work done by the police force and the whole team, and we look forward to the outcome in the spring action plans to address the areas of improvement. So, we look forward to that. Okay, anything else on this item? Okay, move on.
Chair.
Chief Constable.
You'd be glad to know it's brief. I just want to reaffirm that we are absolutely resolute in our determination to continue to improve, especially in the light of challenges of trust and confidence in policing up and down the country. We are aware of that and of course very sensitive to that in that the celebrations and acknowledgement I was very grateful for, but it's in a time of other challenges ongoing to policing. And I commend you all for praising the frontline officers and staff, because it's down to them. There is more to be done. There is definitely room for improvement in many areas, and we don't get everything right all of the time. We know that, and we're not always able to provide the services we wish we could due to resources, demand, pressures. So I wouldn't want anyone to sit here thinking we're celebrating, thinking everything is brilliant. It's good, it's outstanding compared to peers around the country. It really, really is. I'm grateful for that acknowledgement, and it is an amazing report. But all the areas we've touched upon, we've got plans and action and self-assessments and work ongoing, and we'll continue with those most definitely.
Thank you, Chief Constable. Thank you very much for your contribution. And I know with the budgetary constraints, you know, with difficult challenges and to perform and do exceptionally well is really appreciated. So, item 6, mid-term financial forecast.
Thank you, Chair. The paper that you had in front of you was written while we were still awaiting the policing settlement. That came out yesterday, so there will be elements to that have changed. There aren't suppositions, but now we know the facts. So the update on the 21-22 in-year budget, we're on track to balance at the year end. The large overspend in police officer pay through overtime, etc., has been mitigated by underspends in building maintenance, energy. As you can imagine, not everybody was going in, vehicle fleet and travel and subsistence. Regarding the spending review, the key information was that the accompanying inflation forecast, which impact heavily on our assumptions, that we get to the precept of £10 on Fund D as the police precept. Also, the medium-term forecast, we've seen changes in the assumptions on the uplift funding, the timings of spend on the ESN programme, the assumption relievers and the profile of officers, obviously senior officers that have been with the force a long time, they are expensive, and it's getting that balance, and also the assumptions really mix of degree entry and apprentice recruits. In reserves, it's built in the year-end underspend into reserves of greater resilience, and other factors. The Home Office review of the funding formula has commenced, and we'll try and influence it wherever possible. Of course, we will always be making the case that the police need the funding to do the job. But I wondered, Catherine, if there are anything that you wanted to go into more depth about. Obviously, pensions are covered, and the question regarding the national insurance. Pardon? Thank you. Regarding national insurance. And I'll go to Alison for details on the settlement.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So in terms of the NTFF paper in front of you, so obviously it sought to provide you with an update on the income position, which is positive because we're largely on track. It gives a little bit of an overview on the spending review, but obviously we got a lot more detail yesterday, which we'll feed through. I suppose the key points to notice are the changes from when you saw the NTFF in February. So the big changes that the measures refer to around uplift funding and how much we're actually going to receive for the uplift grant. And then, very crucially, a big difference because of the timing on the Emergency Services Network programme. You've heard that programme mentioned a number of times because the forecast timeframe for that to be back a couple of years, that's made some significant assumption changes for our budgetary position, which is very positive because as by the Home Office. And then obviously there's the reference to the leaders and the profiling officers. Really positive that we've been able to absorb the overspend of the officer being over profile. So at the moment we're about 128 officers over profiles. That's great because officers on the street weren't able to cope with that because of the overspend in those key areas that the men mentioned. But of course that has an impact on the future years while they were heavily over profile, and obviously the assumptions are changing because of that. So there's a lot of work ongoing at the moment to reduce the balances that you see on the appendix 1 at the end of the paper. It will change positively slightly because of yesterday's announcements, but of course we hear a lot about the inflationary pressures at the moment and the pressures on pay, and that will have quite an impact as well on our forecasting. But significant amount of work going on in the next month to bring the papers through to you in January for the meeting.
Thank you, Catherine. Alison.
Yeah, thank you for that. We got the settlement figure yesterday, obviously we've been waiting for it for a long time. And in summary, here in West Yorkshire, we've had an overall increase of 21.4 million in grants. But when you look at the detail of that, taking into account pay at 3.5%, which is really welcome in terms of what our police officers and staff deserve, but actually that's going to reduce the 21.4 million by 8.2 million. If you look at inflation, which was in the news yesterday, that's a further reduction in the overall grant of 2.3 million. And as I reported some months ago, we were not assured that national insurance uplift would be included in the settlement, and we were right. And so the additional cost of that is around £3 million. That 21.4 million is now 7.9 million, and we have to cover 341 new police officers with that sum. So what could appear to be 62.76 thousand per officer now goes down to 23.2 thousand per officer, which doesn't even cover starting salaries. The £10 cap on the banding for council tax increases, as was announced during the CSR announcements, is really intrinsic to us being able to deliver our ambitions around policing numbers. Even though the government's talking a lot about a 5.4% increase overall, that is absolutely subject to us getting that £10 precept increase. And in fact, it's nationally, there is something along the lines of £246 million growth, but that is subject and contingent on all police and crime commissioners getting that £10. And obviously not all of them will achieve that. So there were various other announcements regarding national money that's been set aside for drugs, 30 million, serious violence, another 50 million, fraud, 23.1 million. We could spend that just in West Yorkshire, but anyway, crime reduction programmes at 45.8 million, but we don't know yet how these will be allocated across all the forces. It's important to note that there's also been an instruction nationally that further efficiencies across the piece of 80 million will also be needed, so we want to factor that in. We don't know what our share of that will be. So in summary, the settlement was slightly more positive than we thought, because we've been planning the worst case scenario, but there's still going to be some real challenges given the pay and the inflation pressures. And we don't know what's going to come in the next 2 years, because this is only a 1-year allocation. Obviously, the council tax is only a 1-year allocation, and you decide annually on that. So we will bring out to the public in the new year. We're happy to hear on the £10 precept and whether or not the public will be prepared to pay that before we come to you in February with our request for precept. But obviously, it's now more important than ever that we achieve the maximum precept, because 7.9 million, that's not enough to keep the people that we represent across West Yorkshire safe.
Thank you, Alison. It is an incredibly challenging landscape. It's a positive settlement in some regard, but as Alison's laid out, the challenges for our increase in officers is there. if I could just add to the landscape, that I've made the decision as the mayor not to have a mayoral precept this year, because I do understand the cost of living crisis. So I'm hoping that when we come back, that will be in your mind as well, that actually we do need to focus on police and crime over the next 3 years, and this is a way to do it, to make sure that we get those numbers and we keep the people of West Yorkshire safe. So thank you for that, and obviously you'll have time to look at those numbers in more detail and be able to come back to us with your thoughts as well.
Thank you. I'll open up for questions. Sarah, did you want to ask a question now? Trevor?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Obviously, haven't seen the settlement that you just talked us through, but trying to keep up with that, your comments there, a bit of mental arithmetic. I think it's probably going to be about 10 or 12 million short on top of what you're already forecasting. So in Appendix 1, I think the numbers, although they're shown as black, they actually represent a deficit going forward. So I think at the moment, on this figure, there's a 7.5 million deficit, going up to 21 and 32. That's obviously going to be severely impacted now with this settlement. So we would need to see a revised forecast, I think, if this would be possible. And it's not clear, unless I missed it in there, what percentage for inflation has been built into these forecasts. Typically it's around 3%, but I think given the recent announcements and the figures we've got for the next year, that may well be a deficit. I think it's going to be a problem for you to deliver the aspirations and have an increase in police numbers, for the force to continue delivering the level of service it has without greater efficiencies to balance this budget, but obviously the devil's in the detail, and we look forward to receiving that back. But what I would encourage is that clearly to take account of the fact that COVID seems to be going on for perhaps another 18 months to 2 years, possibly, listening to people out there, and on that basis, the experience of the reduction in levers that the force had this year may well continue for another year or so, and I think that needs to be played into the forecast. I think there is something in there for it, but it may not be enough given the latest news we've had. So there's quite a few things I think we'd like to get a bit more information on. The £10 boundary precept, in percentage terms, is still a 4.73% increase for people. I understand the force needs that precept increase because it plays such a large part of the funding, but the majority of the funding is from central, and I think that therefore the recent announcement is a cause of concern, I think, for us going forward.
Thank you for that. Your points are really noted, and as you say, the devil's in the detail. Just trying to boil it down to 20p a week, we'll be making that case. That whilst of course budgets are squeezed, families are squeezed with the university credit uplift going, national insurance rise, heating costs and so on and so on, it's really important that we factor that in, but also what's really important is we keep people safe. So of course we'll be looking at in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from anybody? Can I just make a final comment that it was agreed that before the budget survey goes out, the panel will be consulted. We have a budget panel working group on budget. We've got a few volunteers who want to be part of that group, so if we could be consulted on that.
Of course, this is absolutely a team effort.
Thank you. Thank you. Are we okay on that item? Shall we move on? Okay. Now we go on to item 7, which is delivering quarterly performance report. So can I invite the Mayor?
Thank you very much. Delivering quarterly. Excuse me. This covers the second quarter of 21-22, specifically July to September 2021. And statistics in the report not only cover the 12 months to September 2021 compared with the 12 months to 2020, but due to the effect of the pandemic, also compare, as you'd expect, with the year before to give a more normal comparison. The last panel meeting, there was an ask for more understanding of what the Mayor's Office were doing to meet the challenges outlined in their delivery quarterly. So for this report, there was included a part at the end of each section entitled West Yorkshire Combined Authority Police and Crime Department, with details of outcomes, the delivery from the office and other areas such as funding received or commitments met. And I hope you'll see in that the office is working incredibly hard to support the police and all of our ambitions. So I'll just rattle through some of the key points discussed at the DQ with the Deputy Chief Constable. The meeting took place on the 23rd of November. We discussed confidence and satisfaction. The police were running a pilot in Wakefield to increase confidence, and we discussed the actions taken so far, excuse me, the results from that intervention. And we hope that this will be a blueprint for focused action in neighbourhoods. We also highlighted the importance of talking to all stakeholders, because I understood that some Wakefield councillors and the MP wasn't across the benefits of the pilot, so we were able to share that with councillors and other stakeholders. Also, we focused on stalking as part of my pledge for the safety of women and girls, and that the stalking numbers in West Yorkshire and the emphasis on this crime type. The DCC reassured us action was taking place, and the part of regular discussions with senior leaders. We also asked about stalking protection orders, how they could be used more efficiently. We got some reassurances around this and extra training for officers on identifying potential victims of stalking. And knife crime, whilst historically in the last few months it's been a decrease in knife crime, there's been an increase since the start of the year, and this was obviously a priority of, in our discussions. With the ongoing interventions of Operation Gemlock, the DCC was clear that knife crime is a priority for the police and continues to be lower in West Yorkshire than other comparable areas, but we are not complacent, and will obviously be part of our police and crime plan that you will be hearing more about in a moment. Just other points from the full document. Total crime just below the levels of 2019, but nearly 9% above the levels of September 20. Obviously, the pandemic has skewed those figures, and neighbourhood crime and higher levels of personal crime are also to be looked at, with women and girls, domestic and sexual offences far too high. Even with the pressures, the police continue to keep 90% of officers on the front line, which is obviously critical. The public need to see officers out in their communities. Serious violence overall showing good reductions, but that's going to be, as you can imagine, part of the metrics in the new plan. Outcomes for domestic abuse and rape continue to be on the agenda, and there is a slight decrease, and that's to be incredibly welcome. Much of this due to the pressures on the criminal justice system, which obviously will be a big feature going forward, and it's been really welcome over the last few months to be able to meet the stakeholders in the criminal justice system to see how we can all work together as partners to all pull our weight to get those positive outcomes rising more rapidly around domestic abuse and rape. There's some good work taking place with the courts. The stats for liaison and diversion detailed in the document, and really pleased to see the number of high referrals for young people. We have a focus on early intervention, as you know, and this liaison and diversion work is pivotal in stopping young people ending up as either victims or vulnerable or going into a life of crime. The repeat victim rate for domestic abuse is no longer rising, which is good to see, and only one area showed a significant rise in hate crime. You'll know that I'll go on to speak about it, that misogyny and misandry is now going to be logged as a hate crime, so hate crime will be a focus for us. We'll be looking at that more closely going forward. So overall, in conclusion, it's really work together to improve outcomes for the public. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I now open up for questions and comments on the quarterly delivery report? We'll start off with Amanda Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question with regard to domestic violence, which is higher in West Yorkshire than in other areas quite considerably. And it may well be because it's reported better and handled better, or it may be there is just more of it, or it may be a bit of both. At the moment, and I'm sure the councillors are having the same kind of emails, there is a lot of persistent and angry emails, and a lot of it is related to mental health, because having nearly 2 years of lockdown, people are really struggling and they're very angry. And I think if you're locked in the house with an angry person, that's when domestic violence occurs. And just to make a point aside to that, I'm now getting emails from men victims who are being accused of domestic violence and haven't actually done any because this particular woman was jumping on the bandwagon about it. So that is also to be aware that the police need to be very clear with their investigation. But could I ask for some reassurance on the stats for domestic violence, please?
Thank you. I'll go over to Alison in a moment, but it is positive, we're looking at it positively, that if women feel that they can report domestic violence because they trust that something will be done, and the fact that we as West Yorkshire Police are exceptional in our reporting numbers. So I do accept it is about disseminating between good reporting and a rise. Can I just say, before we just go back to domestic violence, I do agree with you that there is a rise in anger in the public, and I myself was part of an altercation on the train where, because I was wearing a mask, I was yelled at and abused by a young man for being a fool and an idiot, and it was very abusive and unpleasant. And I think mask wearing and it has there is that rising anger and that division between our communities that really we must get a grip on. But if I could go to Alison specifically about your point.
Yeah, thanks so much for that question, Amanda. So obviously, as we always say, crime rate and integrity in West Yorkshire is outstanding, so we do record more crimes than most civil forces, and the police are working with CPS and other partners to turn those reports of domestic abuse into people in court, and hopefully if the evidence is there being found guilty, so getting justice for the victims. But as I've said in many places, and I've seen want to take domestic abusers off the street, and the national policy of CPS doesn't always allow us to get the justice for victims that we want. And that is a big area of challenge and campaign that our areas are taking nationally, and written to the APCC, victims leads and the criminal justice system leads, to ask them to pick this up as one of their lead foci for the rest of this year, because the policy of CPS relating to domestic abuse is not helping us get the justice that we need for victims. It's taking too long, and that's why victims are withdrawing consent, and that's why we are not looking as positive as we would want. Clearly, the police are also looking at more creative ways of getting that evidence. So they use Good Sam, which is a brilliant tool, by the way, whereby we can get recorded evidence of the victim's statement in situ. We can see any evidence of wounds or bruising, etc., for us to be able to take that to CPS as part of the evidence bundle. Again, CPS are not as helpful as we want them to be, and those conversations continue. In relation to male domestic abuse victims, we know that whilst there were 1.6 million female victims of domestic abuse last year, there were also 750,000 male victims of domestic abuse, which is one of the reasons why we're now so delighted that Miss Andre, as well as the county, will be flagged by West Yorkshire Police from the 1st of December. However, clearly we've got to consider ringing you and putting his side of the story. The police will always investigate these things, will never make assumptions, and once they end, and I can give you, we were given some examples of where a case looked really clearly to look like this, but actually upon receipt of CCTV evidence, it completely turned around, and the Chief Constable reported a few of those instances to the Mayor himself just this week. So we recognise that people have a viewpoint, and it's not always the right viewpoint. But please be assured that the police will always investigate and utilise all the evidence that is available before they make a judgment.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back very quickly on a point that I am very concerned about. I do find that the police are very good at the point of domestic violence, and I think Safer Leeds also react very well. I think we've got a good department there. However, that cannot be said for other departments, and I don't know whether it's spread across West Yorkshire or indeed the country, but I do find that other services with the council have complained about by women, in particular children's services and adult social care, because quite often there is mental health involved, there are usually children involved, and women are telling me they don't feel supported. So when you're talking about interaction with other agencies, I think it's really important that the police are very strong on the fact that they should make sure that those other agencies engaged. If the police are concerned, then those other agencies should be concerned as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that 62% of all children are impacted by domestic abuse in this country. 39,000 of those are children under the age of 1. It's a huge problem. We know that many refuges have been closed, and so women and children are not always as safe as they could be. The police have got safeguarding hubs in all 5 districts of West Yorkshire, which has been set up since 2016 in response to safeguarding concerns that were raised. At the time, some of those safeguarding arrangements are funded nationally by the Home Office in relation to historical CSA, for example, and those safeguarding hubs are partnership hubs, which children's safeguarding, adult safeguarding, police, probation, local authorities, voluntary sector partners are all part of those arrangements, and the evidence of how effective those partnerships are has been demonstrated through local steps and other safeguarding bodies that are taking place. There's always more to do, always much more to do, because you're only as strong as your weakest link, as we discovered this week. And at the end of the day, we all need to be vigilant, we need to work together and be absolutely focused on keeping particularly children across all our community safe. And we never believe what we're told. We triangulate, we ask, we get more and more evidence, because we know that something can look like X and it can actually be Y. So yeah, but those arrangements are very securely in place and headed up by the police, but also partners such as local authorities that are really intrinsic to their success.
I know they're in place, but in some cases they're not actually working. I do have some very serious concerns about the other agencies.
Thank you. Can I now invite Councillor Maureen Tennant-King? Did you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I want to raise a question about the confidence and satisfaction, and it's about the pilot scheme that you've been running in Wakefield at the moment. It is nice to engage with the public. It makes them feel valued, and people be able to be listening to their concerns. But I'm just wanting to know is, will this scheme be running any longer and in all districts over the Wakefield area? Because I don't want it to be done at the expense of other areas in Wakefield, because we've had a lot of emails and messages where constituents weren't very satisfied because they weren't getting the responses, because other officers were doing this survey?
Thanks. It was a door-to-door survey, just for those that don't know, and the uptake of the community website then actually went up exponentially. People started to engage with community safety. So that face-to-face, I think, was very welcome. It was a time-limited programme, but Alison, you want to fill us in with that?
Yeah, so as the Mayor reported in her earlier comments, this was an exercise undertaken in Wakefield, and I think it was the more rural parts of Wakefield. 21,000 doors were knocked on, lots of engagement with people who don't normally see the place. 3,500 people signed up to the community alert, which is the way that the police communicate with the public about, oh, please lock your doors because there's a space of burglaries, or did you know this, or let's be part of the solution in relation to whatever it is. So it's a really great way to communicate. I was asked to attend a meeting in Wakefield with the Lake Group, which I did, to hear about their feedback on that scheme, and whereas the group recognised the importance of the police connecting with all communities of Wakefield, they felt that the communication around this and the abstraction of PCSOs in particular from the whole of Wakefield to service this piece of work had not been clearly communicated out to them or to the wider public, and in some cases to the PCSOs themselves. And so that they felt that there could have been a better approach, and as a result of that, I spoke to the divisional commander, who has agreed to come to meet the councillors concerned and to have a conversation about how best to roll that out in wider Wakefield, if indeed that will be the case. It's all being evaluated at the moment, and a decision will be taken on whether to take that further at a different time. But that will all be subject, of course, to conversations that the divisional commander will have with the Wakefield councillors, for success or otherwise. It might be that other areas of Leeds feel that that's a benefit to them, and that's obviously up to their divisional commanders and the community that they serve. But I think there's a clear recognition that the communication in Wakefield could have been better, and those conversations will now start.
If I might add, though, I think there is always opportunities for innovation to talk to our communities and to build that confidence. And I am always open to new ideas about how we do that. And some are obviously more successful than others. So it would be interesting to see the further outcomes, who takes this up more widely. But I think the sign-up for the community alert was really welcome when I think as many people signed up as new signatories as current. So I think that engagement is definitely a positive that's come out of that.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Sophie Richardson, do you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would just like to congratulate and welcome the significant reduction in missing people's figures. I was the key link member under the previous PCP, so I know that one of the reasons for such a substantial figure for missing children, for instance, was looked after children, but also feeding into that and contributing to that was inadequate placements, and therefore inappropriate placements, and also private providers not being regulated as much as, say, the local authorities are. So I was just wondering what is it that's working, and whether we're seeing the fruits of previous measures that were in place that are now coming through in the figures.
Alison?
Thank you so much for that recognition. Huge amount of work has been going on with the police and with the safeguarding hubs and with the providers themselves. And as you rightly say, the local authorities are sometimes forced to use, because they don't have as many of their own in-house provision, such as their in-house provision as before, they're using private providers. And many young people, you can't care young people, they are free to go to school, college, meet their friends, live their lives. They are young people who are entitled to have the same freedoms as other young people, but they're then much more likely to be vulnerable to grooming, to abusers, and also to making decisions that are not in their best interests. And so the police have been working so much more closely as part of those safeguarding hubs that I mentioned earlier, within the partnerships and with the local authorities and then the individual establishments, and that is bearing dividends. The work continues. The Mayor and I get regular updates of things that happened in districts every day, and missing people, not always young people from care homes, often older people with dementia, but sometimes we do see that it's a missing person from care home, and actually the amount of work that's going into identifying where that young person is, including talking to other pharmacies, looking at financials in terms of credit cards or use of their bank accounts. It's unbelievable. Mobile phone tracking, all sorts of stuff to get those young people safe. So what the police are doing is amazing. We're not always vested by all the partners, picking up your point. But in this case, the local authorities are working very, very hard to get much better outcomes for these young people. So thank you for noticing.
Thank you.
There are, bigger crimes and more serious events, but it is something that impacts people in their local community. It's something that I think adds to that general sort of feeling of helplessness and anger and stuff. So I was going to ask a question, but I was noticing, thank you to my colleague Sophie Whitaker for pointing out that we've noticed that there's a community speed watch coordinated being sought for Coldvale particularly. And so I just wanted to ask, is that part of the measures to try and help bring this in hand to a certain extent, and if this is something that's just for Coldvale or being more widely across West Yorkshire. And then the other part is that I have been specifically asked to ask about the Hormill funding and whether or not that can, obviously there's budgetary pressures, we've heard about those today, but whether that can be sort of done on a 3-year funding rather than just a single year funding this time. So thank you.
So regarding the speeding, we've seen some really good work done by local councillors. It has to be part of a more wide-reaching picture, and Alison is leading from the front on this. I don't know if you want to go into a bit of detail.
So, as you will know, about our very first meeting, Amanda raised the question of speeding in cars. I then got Councillor Megan Swift, then contacted me, Councillor Shimmy, and then contacted me. And it became a bit of a tsunami of contact from various councils across West Yorkshire about the issue of antisocial car use, people trying to have helmets and speeding cars. And I took that to the Mayor, and she asked me to present to all 5 leaders in the summer to suggest that we politically coordinate all the individual work, which is really good on a local basis, but not really brought together under a coherent manner. So the Mayor asked me to present the paper to the 5 leaders, requesting permission to set up a Vision Zero board on behalf of the 5 leaders and the Mayor, which we had our very first meeting on last Monday, the 13th of December. What was brilliant about it is that not only have we got the police and I can never remember the name of it, the reduction partnership, that's what it was. But we also had Public Health, the Directors of Public Health from Calderdale, Tim Swift was on there, and the league members for the speeding across all 5 local authorities. So the seniority of the membership had Councillor Kim Groves representing Metro. It was amazing, the quality of the people in that room. Brave were there, and we started the conversation about how do we work together more collegiately, more effectively, to understand what works under the Vision Zero umbrella and to disseminate that through the whole of West Yorkshire. So the meeting happened, the work is starting, there's a strategic roads executive that remains in place, led by Bradford, and that work is now being led by us, where the strategic body that is giving direction to that board, and hopefully we'll begin to start to see things changing in our communities. But we are taking it so seriously, investing a lot of time and energy into this board. I'm feeling very hopeful and excited. We're going to bring in some lived experience as well onto that board. and our office is looking at who's best, best people to represent their experience. But yeah, it started, it's very exciting, and I want to thank everyone for their support, and we'll keep contacting back as and when we can.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. We welcome that work and really appreciate for you to highlight that and set up a working group and join all 5 local authorities to look at it in detail, which we can't say it was ignored, but it was something where we had not much say on it in the past, even as elected members, so we're really grateful for that. Thank you. Now, can I invite Joe? Joe, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment, really. 3.4.3 around child sexual exploitation. The report states that it's decreased in comparison to last year with 80 less offences, and that the percentage of child sexual exploitation offences that is falling. I just wondered if that should really read reported child sexual exploitation offences having decreased, because we don't know, and it's a massive challenge, and I'd hate to be a perception that this isn't an area that needs the intense concentration that I'm absolutely sure the force is giving it. So I just think really that needs to be picked up for anybody reading this outside the meeting who doesn't understand what we're doing. Sorry.
Thank you, Joe. That's a good point that I picked up.
Thank you. Last question from Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to offer my support with the protection of women and girls, but what I did want to ask around that is the focus. Will it take away from the biggest percentage of victims, which is 64% of victims are homicide, and then males are twice as likely to be victims of violent crime? And just wondered if we focus on women and girls, whether this statistic is going to increase rather than decrease.
Thank you. I would say it's not an either or. I would say it's a new focus. Given my own lived experience as the mayor, coming in and having more of a focus on the safety of women and girls, it absolutely will not take away from that serious crime, murders investigation, absolutely not. But it is saying loud and proud, as West Yorkshire, as a woman or a girl, we have got your back, we are listening to you, and you've been fully served for decades, where domestic violence has been trundling along at terrible figures, 2 or 3 women dying a week, and this is an opportunity, a unique opportunity, with 2 women at the helm, with lived experience, to focus on what needs to be done. Innovation, new ideas, working with partners, and as the only one of 2 mayors in the country with responsibilities for police and crime, having that public health approach, it will not in any way take us away from that equally serious work. Absolutely not. But what we mustn't allow ourselves to do is to divide our approach between who we should be focusing on. This is about everybody across West Yorkshire, and everybody having the confidence that when they are a victim, that they will be served properly. And I see your point, and I would encourage you to not feel that there will be any way an erosion in focus on those other serious crimes. But let's not forget that the majority of women who are harmed by men and boys. The majority of men who are harmed by men and boys. So we have a job of work to do in our society to make life safer by doing that diversionary work for young men, by making sure that we don't have repeat offenders who come out of prison and carry on being criminals and destroying people's lives. It is absolutely not an either or. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
No, you said that perfectly.
Okay. But can I thank Mayor for this report, and thank the police as well the overall reduction in crime and statistics, and also really welcome the in terms of prioritising the safety of children and women especially, which wasn't ignored, but it was like you used the word trundling along, and we really appreciate that you have given emphasis on every crime in terms of your police and crime plan, but especially for the victims of domestic violence and abuse of women and child sexual exploitation and human trafficking, and those kind of crimes which were often not ignored but put under the whole the holistic approach. So thank you very much, and we will move on to. And the other point I wanted to make as chair, I find your reports very user-friendly or reader-friendly, shall I say. So thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on to next item, which is 8.
Is it 7, Chair?
Sorry, 7. So, which is item 8, development of West Yorkshire Police and Crime, and we will have a presentation, I think. Thank you.
Could I make some opening remarks, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. As you know, we have gone out to consultation to the public on the police and crime plan. But I just wanted to pick up on your comment, Chair, on the readability of the reports, because what I wanted to do in this plan is to respond to the public's engagement with an equally direct approach. So this plan is obviously for this panel, but it's for the public who have engaged with us so far, so that the public have access to our thinking. And as you'll know from previous comments and previous conversations we've had, the themes of early intervention, of the safety of women and girls, equality, diversity and inclusivity, and making sure that our communities feel safe and are safe are going to be themes in this plan. But the reason why you don't have a draft of a plan today is because of that incredible consultation, and it has taken us a wee while to just bring that consultation together. So I'm hoping that the documents that you have are incredibly thorough and get us on the journey to developing the plan in more detail. But I just wonder, Alison, would you share with the panel the range of engagement that we had over the last few months?
It's been amazing. So, as you know, we've reported here many times. We undertook a huge consultation exercise. We had the consultation document in 5 different languages as routine, but offered the opportunity for it to be interpreted, translated into any language that people wanted. We also had an easy read format. As well as that, we encourage people to email us direct, to send in TikTok videos, to tweet, and people have taken us at our word, and the responses that just keep coming in, and the staff are working flat out to get those consultations written down, capture every single voice, because we want to honour the engagement from the people of West Yorkshire. In the papers, you have the report from Sharon Watt and her team regarding the consultation exercise. Tracy and I have seen nearly 1,000 people during this period, just on our own, 2,500 individual responses, but also all the other responses that came by different formats. The office said that they're going to have so many diverse ways of responding into the consultation, but they've never had so many people individually or by group responding. We've also encouraged a partnership response to all our partners, criminal justice partners, local authority partners, CSPs, etc. And we've got over 40 partnership responses, and they're still coming in because people don't always listen to the deadline, so they're still coming in. And as a result of that, we just didn't want to do a final plan without honouring those voices. And but the plan pretty much as we have it today, you're going to see from Erica in a moment, but we just want to make sure that every single voice is included, and we didn't want to create that. But yeah, it's been a fantastic response, and thank you to the people of West Yorkshire for being engaged, for caring so much, and yeah, we will not let you down.
Thank you, Alison. And now I'm going to hand over to Erica, who's going to talk us through the next steps beyond the needs assessment and the voice of West Yorkshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We're just having a couple of minor technical difficulties in terms of equipment. We have a older projector to a laptop, so we're just looking for technology that will adapt. We've done new hard copies of the presentation though, and we will, after the meeting, ensure that all the members of the panel have an electronic copy as well, just for your information. So, because there's an awful lot of detail in there, so and some of it is for you to take away and digest to help you understand where we've got to in the process. And also, this is such a prime time for us to actually understand, for you to understand where we've got to and for you to feedback your comments and engagement. So I will, hopefully the technology will catch up with me, but I will start the presentation. So as you can see, the title slide, and then moving on to the second slide. This is really just to illustrate to the panel that we haven't been complacent. The Mayor was elected in May, and we have taken every opportunity to drive the plan, even though it's not finalised. And a tremendous amount of work in progress has already happened, focusing on what our communities want, what they're telling us, and that's important to them, and also the two mayoral pledges in relation to policing and crime. I'm not going to go through all those points on there, but I would like to highlight to the panel some of the really tremendous ones and important ones on that list. The office has brought in over £3.5 million of additional funding, and this has been aimed particularly at victims of domestic abuse, sexual violence, and this has made a real difference. Extensive consultation and engagement programme ever by the office into shaping this new police and crime plan. We've surveyed and got responses to of over 2,500 responses to the public survey, and we have spoken face to face to over 1,000 people. We've just launched last month the Mayor's Safe Community Fund funding targeted at community groups and charities to support and build capacity at grassroots level. And through the funding spoken about at the beginning, we've now got 25 additional IDVAs and ISVAs aimed at supporting those who are victims of domestic abuse and sexual abuse. As we've just heard from the Deputy Mayor, we've created a new Vision Zero board, with a real move to look at making roads safer, and that emphasis on prevention of casualties rather than reduction. And this month sees the recording of misogyny as a hate crime by West Yorkshire Police. There again, such an important step forward in terms of the safety of women and girls in West Yorkshire. So that's not everything on that slide, and you can take that away at your leisure and just digest some of the other major achievements of the office over the last 7 months. So just moving on to slide number 3, the outline of the plan. The landscape of the police and crime plan has changed so much since the last one was produced in 2016. If you look at the range of partners we now work with, it's much wider than the traditional community safety partnerships and community safety partners we work with. It's expanded out now, and also moving that forward through a giant step is the offer of having a Metro Mayor in West Yorkshire and the opportunity of devolution that this has afforded West Yorkshire. So at the disposal of the Mayor now, we are looking at bringing together things such as housing, skills, education and employment, digital innovation, and certainly not forgetting transport. And that is more important than ever as we look at across the whole system in terms of trying to tackle the root causes of this, which really brings us back to early intervention and prevention and learning of the violence reduction unit. There again, something else that did not exist for the last police and crime plan, and the public health approach, and really making a difference to tackling inequalities right across West Yorkshire, getting upstream, dealing with the nub of the problem before it becomes more serious and starts attacking and decaying the communities of West Yorkshire. The evidence base for this police and crime plan is so much bigger than we've ever dealt with before. We're now looking at data across the whole system, and on top of that is the comprehensive consultation engagement work that the office has undertaken. The voice of West Yorkshire is very much at the heart of this plan, and what we're trying to do through the outline of this plan is tell a story. Where are we now? What are the priorities, and why are these a priority? What do we want to change, particularly looking to the long and medium term, getting some really clear outcomes of how we can make a difference, and then having some clear indicators in terms of monitoring and charting that journey in terms of the journey of improvement.
Good question. Is it switched on? Maybe keep going there.
Right, okay.
Doing a brilliant job anyway without the problem.
So, as you can see from slide 3, the outline of the plan will have a forward from the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and the Chief Constable of West Yorkshire. We'll outline some of the progress and momentum to date in terms of that journey has already started, and we very much want to build on that journey and increase that momentum over the next 2.5 years. We will have the evidence base. We have the evidence base in terms of the needs assessment, the voice of West Yorkshire in terms of what people, communities and individuals are telling us, those objectives, outcomes and indicators, and overarching deliverables, which we're splitting down so the panel can easily see which partner or agency is contributing to that, whether that's West Yorkshire Police, the Mayor and Wicker, or our partners right across policing, crime, community safety and criminal justice. Not forgetting the strategic policing requirement, which is really, really fundamental to the plan, and it's really important we make sure we give due regard to those hidden threats and risks that people of West Yorkshire may not realise are always here in West Yorkshire, and we need to be really aware of that and build that into the plan and make sure that the resources that West Yorkshire Police need to deal with those are built into the plan. Also the 2 mayoral pledges of additional police officers and police staff over the next 3 years, and the safety of women and girls at the very heart of this plan. There will also be a section how we'll deliver this. and that will include the resources available to West Yorkshire Police, and then due to the announcement of the secondment yesterday, a lot of work will be going on into that and aligning the plan to the medium-term financial forecast as well. And as I've spoken about, that journey of improvement, that performance framework, we've got a draft performance framework for the panel today on that very last slide, which I'll come to towards the end of the presentation. So just to bring it back to that kind of strategic level, we've now got a new vision. We've worked with the Partnership Executive Group and key strategic leaders right across West Yorkshire to come up with a new vision, which is West Yorkshire safe, just and inclusive. And that's the ultimate end goal of what we want to achieve. Our priorities have been honed and slightly tailored since doing the consultation to ensure that we've got the wording right, it resonates with people, and also is going to really drive activity. So in terms of the supporting victims and witnesses, we've now increased that to supporting victims and witnesses and improving criminal justice outcomes, because we need to start looking across the whole criminal justice system. The responsibility for victims and witnesses does not sit just with the police, and it's about looking at the new victims law, which will come into effect next year, and ensuring that we are working across the whole of the system, putting victims at the very heart of that journey throughout the criminal justice system. We've then got keeping people safe and building resilience, which is very much looking at crimes against the person and vulnerability. Safer places and thriving communities, which is very much place-based crime. And responding to multiple and complex needs, which is there again acknowledging that the solutions to many of these problems lie with early intervention and prevention. It's about diverting people away from the criminal justice system, and it's about also recognising the fact that it's not just about the police, it's about us all working together to tackle these problems at the earliest opportunity to get upstream of these issues. So the priorities are what we need to focus on. We then have 3 cross-cutting themes. The safety of women and girls, which is one of the mayoral pledges, placing the safety of women and girls at the heart of the police and crime plan. Equality, diversity, inclusion, early intervention and prevention, and this is where we're going to be putting our energy. It's not that we're going to be neglecting other areas, it's going to be that the main focus and thrust of what we do will be focused around these 3 main themes. We've got 8 very clear enablers on what will help us get there. So it's through effective leadership, taking advantage of a Metro Mayor and the systems leadership that opportunity presents, working with a whole variety of partners. Like I said previously, it's not just about police and crime and criminal justice partners, it's about a whole range of partners, particularly health and other areas that we haven't traditionally worked with. It's also about community level funding and capacity building, and the work and the funding through the Safe Community Fund does address that, and it's looking at that grassroots level in our communities to help communities find solutions for themselves and build that capacity they need. As usual, there's always data and information sharing, that old chestnut, ensuring that right across the partnership we are sharing the information we've got to make best use of it, to make really informed decisions and put our resources where the data and information is telling us it's needed, and targeting that effectively. Workforce development, building skills and capacity, that's not just West Yorkshire Police, but there again with across the partnership, and having a workforce right across the public sector and third sector, which is responsive to the needs set out in this plan. Integration of partners and services, fundamental behind the whole systems approach to tackling inequalities. The commissioning of services, which sits with the Mayor and the Deputy, and targeting those effectively. And best practice innovation. This plan is aiming to be big, it's bold, innovative, and really leading the way in some of the areas set out to really make a difference to the lives of people who live in West Yorkshire. So, moving on to priorities. Key priority 1, supporting victims and witnesses, improving criminal justice outcomes. And this is about supporting victims, witnesses and those harmed by crime, putting them at the very heart of the police and crime plan and helping people get justice. So this is a real overview of what our needs assessments and the consultation and engagement work is telling us. And we'll put some quotes in there which hopefully will bring it really to life for the panel. Things must change dramatically as it's becoming the norm that offenders can continue criminal behaviour without recourse. They know nothing will be done. Criminal justice system needs to focus on victims being at the heart of everything, not just whether they can make a prosecution stick. The police want to get good outcomes for victims, but they face obstacles from complex criminal justice case building processes and the CPS not wanting to proceed with offences. The courts issue lenient sentences, leaving victims feeling disillusioned. So that is just kind of a sample of some of the feedback we've heard. And in terms of the text, just on the right hand side of that slide, that tells us of some of the findings in terms of the public consultation and also the needs assessment, which members can take away and digest at their leisure. So for each of the priorities, we've put together kind of a strategic framework and it relates back to what I was saying about trying to tell a story. So we've got the objectives of what we're aiming to do and achieve over the medium and long term, some really clear outcomes of where we wanted to make a difference, those indicators about the journey of improvement, so we can see where we are on that journey and ensure we're going in the right direction. The associated strategies and partnership working that supports that area of work, and what we will do to make this happen, broken down by West Yorkshire Police, the Mayor and West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and also our partners. Now there's a massive health warning in terms of some of the detail around this. We've still got some work to do in terms of digesting that partnership consultation work and fully understanding what is possible in terms of the budget envelope for West Yorkshire Police, and also really going through with a fine-tooth comb what people have told us matters to them and will make the biggest impact. So these are very much a start of 10, which will be kind of honed and kind of negotiated with partners over the next month, so that when you see the draft plan at the end of January, this detail will be much more firmed up. We've also got a section on the safety of women and girls, going back to the mayoral pledge and putting this at the very heart of the plan, and that talks about how that priority will make a difference to the safety of women and girls. So like I say, there is a lot of detail in there, and all members have got hard copies so they can go away and digest that information. Moving on to key priority 2, keeping people safe and building resilience. This police and crime plan will focus on the people who commit crime to change their offending behaviour, tackle the underlying causes, reduce the opportunities for crimes to be committed, and build the resilience to empower communities to overcome damaging behaviour. So just kind of a couple of quotes then from our consultation engagement work. West Yorkshire could lead the way with VOG and be a beacon of best practice, support for rape victims, old and new, and adult survivors of CSE need action. They have already been failed for decades by ignoring this brutal crime against our women and girls. Speaking about the impact of domestic abuse, when we report domestic abuse to West Yorkshire Police, it is hard having to relive our story multiple times. One point of contact is essential. We would like more support from the police, including a better cultural awareness of how this impacts the investigation, the shame for our families, what will happen to our children, and the availability of interpreters. And that is from a voice of a survivor of domestic abuse who has spoken to the Mayor and the Deputy over the consultation engagement period. There again, there's some highlights in terms of what the needs assessment said, in terms of the story of child criminal exploitation and modern slavery and human trafficking in there. And we've also got a move across from serious acquisitive crime, burglary, such, to seeing that decrease over COVID-19, the pandemic, to an increase in crimes that disproportionately affect women and girls. So an awful lot of information also in the summary document you have available to you in the papers that were circulated to the panellists this time as well, for you to really understand why this is a priority, what the need is, and what the consultation engagement work is telling us. So there again, we set that out with the objectives, outcomes, indicators, associated strategies and partnerships, what we'll do to make this happen, and also that section on women and girls. So key priority 3, safe places and thriving communities. This police and crime plan will focus on the harmful and unacceptable behaviour that targets different communities of West Yorkshire. It will tackle the place-based crime that damages people's everyday lives, from serious violence to antisocial behaviour to dangerous driving and speeding. And as members of the panel know already, in terms of that constant voice they hear from the local community, road safety has come as a key issue throughout all the consultation engagement we've done. Some quotes here. Boy racers, modified vehicles, quad bikes and dirt bikes have made urban areas of Leeds a misery throughout lockdown. The police never seem to do anything. My area is becoming a scary place to live. Car theft from people's houses. I'm personally wary of buying a nice car, as I've been a victim of car theft and burglary. Roads becoming safer must be also a priority. There are very dangerous drivers continuing to cruise the streets. A road accident where a lady lost her life on one of the many sad examples. I've given up reporting things to the police. Nothing seems to be done. Drug taking and selling is blatant. It's come and see it everywhere you go. The same as speeding. Putting up cameras and speed bumps is not the answer. People just slow down and speed up after they pass them. Antisocial behaviour is also the norm. Again, nothing is ever done and it's not seen as urgent. But if you live in an area where this is prevalent and it affects more than your daily life, it's about the mental, physical and emotional impact. So there again, there's some further information from the needs assessment on the right hand of the slide, and we've set this priority up the same as the others for partners to take away and digest that information and detail on the slides. Key priority 4, responding to multiple and complex needs. This police and crime plan will bring together partners to work together to recognise the lived experience of all who come into contact with services, protect all those who are vulnerable, and instil a whole systems approach to focusing on early intervention. We will listen, understand and respond to people's needs in order to reduce offending and prevent intergenerational crime and re-victimisation. So there again, some of the quotes we got from consultation. We need to understand why crimes are committed in the first place and start getting to the root of the complex web of these issues. The focus should be prevention, not reaction. Prevention has to be the key, and this is the means police officers. This means police officers working in multi-agency partnerships alongside social workers. We can't allow the police force to be picking up mental health crisis in this country. We need to intervene earlier in people's lives and support prevention before people become offenders or victims. So this priority is very much centred on reducing reoffending, diverting people away from criminal justice, and, as I said, looking at public health approach and dealing with early intervention and prevention at the earliest opportunity. And there again, we've got some moving, I think the opportunities, the devolution and having a Metro Mayor offers, particularly around this priority, is massive. And it is a really exciting time to work with our colleagues in the LEP and other areas of combined authority to join up those areas and to make a real difference to the outcomes of people's lives. We also asked in the consultation engagement work what the Mayor can do to keep people, women and girls safe, and also what we can do to build confidence in the local police. So there again, we've got some quotes here. Victims must include communities. I have not been robbed or burgled, but I do feel like a victim having to tolerate low levels of antisocial behaviour in my community. And another one, believe women and girls when they say they feel unsafe or have experienced a sexual assault, then act on it. So like I say there, if you read through the Voice of West Yorkshire summary and highlights, there are some really impactful statements in there, and you know we want to put that voice and the opinions and views of the people in West Yorkshire and really understand what they're telling us and put them at the heart of this plan. Also is the mayoral pledge, and this slide just demonstrates to members everything we do in this plan has that the safety of women and girls as a golden thread running through it, whether that's the understanding of the problem, the delivery or the outcomes. The police and crime plan is very much going to be the overarching plan for police and crime and community safety and criminal justice in West Yorkshire. Over the next 12 months we will be developing strategies that sit underneath it, working with our partners to really drive that activity and really understand down to a granular level what we'll be doing, who will be doing it, how we can work together to really make an impact on all these areas. So in terms of women and girls, we'll be producing the West Yorkshire Safety of Women and Girls strategy, supporting victims and witnesses and improving criminal justice outcomes. We have already got the West Yorkshire Victims and Witnesses strategy, which we plan to refresh, and we'll be working with our partners within the LCJB to produce a local criminal justice strategy to support better outcomes across the criminal justice system. Keeping people safe and building resilience. We'll have the West Yorkshire Vulnerability and Safeguarding Strategy, and working particularly with our partners in the community safety partnerships. We'll be looking at a place-based strategy for the Safer Places and Thriving Communities priority, and underpinning that as well is the Violence Reduction Unit response strategy, really looking at serious violence and those underlying causes in communities. Responding to multiple and complex needs, we will be developing a strategy which looks at diverting people away from the criminal justice system and also responding to those at risk of criminality and responding to their multiple and complex needs. So at the moment we're in the process of pulling together the performance framework, and we'd very much like your input on this. This is by no means the finished product, it's a work in progress, and as members of the panel may be aware, we're getting what feels like a tsunami of policy and initiatives coming out from central government at the moment, which we need to be aware of in terms of making sure this is fit for purpose and supporting the national policy direction as well as the local West Yorkshire context. So this is very much a starter for 10 for members, and we'd very much like to hear members' feedback on that if they have any ideas on how to shape that. So, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Firstly, can I just say thank you, Erica and the team. This is really
a dynamic piece of work that's building on the work that we've already done. So I just wanted to publicly thank you very much for that, and a really great, powerful presentation. Thank you. Sorry, Alison.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to also say on the offer to help us look at the performance framework. Wendy is really happy to do a workshop with members on the whole of our performance reporting, because we know that what we report might not sometimes work for you. And so Wendy's really happy to do a little session for whoever wants to come along, and we'll liaise with Sam about that. And then we can also include a session on the performance framework, so if anyone's interested can give us some ideas.
I'll take reclaim my chair. Yeah, thank you, Erica. That was really useful presentation, very helpful, very clear understanding, and very ambitious plan, obviously, deep in every detail of crime. So we welcome that, we support that, the efforts made by the Mayor of consultation, reaching out to all the communities in West Yorkshire. And I've seen a list of organisations you have attended there. And all the overall responses have not been as much as we would like to have from in the survey. The number of people who have responded to the survey is not as much as it could have been, the amount of work you have done. There's some very positive contributions and comments made by people, members of the public, which are very useful and helpful for the York to take into consideration. Now, obviously, I will give opportunity to people who want to speak. I have Trevor first on the list from our pre-meeting. Trevor, do you want to come in, and then I'll Amanda and Paul?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I think it's a shame that we couldn't have had this document circulated with the other documents that we'd had, and we could have had a chance to look through it beforehand. It's always a bit challenging when we're short of time, isn't it, to spend 30 minutes on a presentation of that 20 slides for this briefing document. And I think it might have been more effective use of our time to have in advance if possible in the future, so that we can contribute more. Because I think the benefit for all of us is the interaction and the feedback that you want from us. My key observations on the documents that we did receive beforehand were that I don't think you're going to deliver this before the new year. That seems to be quite clear from what you're saying. So I don't think you can head it up a 2021-24 plan. It's clearly in 2022-24. And there is also reference in there around hard to hear groups, which I'm not sure I would agree with that terminology. I thought maybe seldom heard would be a more preferential term. I don't think people are hard to hear, they're just seldom heard very often. In terms of the policing numbers, there are some references in there, some mixed messages again, I think, in terms of in the appendix 8, which is around the policing in West Yorkshire. We're talking about levelling up to the similar forces, GMP and West Midlands Police, and recommendations priority be given to the mayoral pledge to increase by 750 officers and staff. That's not the same as increasing police numbers. So I think if we can have some clarity around that and get into the detail would be helpful. And I think really for us as members, it's really important we see what sits below this and how you're going to deliver it, because I think we're going to be up against it to get this out by February, March. I think we'll then be straight into the new financial year, and I think it's important that we hit the ground running, or you and your team hit the ground running, so it's really important to see the bits below it for us. So thank you very much. My last point would be, I think the consultation you've done is absolutely fantastic. That's outstanding. I would say the 2,500 responses is not a great number to be able to say it's a good response reflective of the community of West Yorkshire. So if there was any opportunity to further increase that or to continue to run it in the background at the same time as doing the plan, I think that would be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just thank you for your comments? And certainly, 2,500, I would have been happier with 5 and onward. But also, I'm pleased with the diversity of those voices. And we did work incredibly hard to try and speak to everybody, whether that's young people, the Young in COVID team in Bradford, whether that's on-street sex workers, whether that's families, older people who often feel really at the sharp edge of antisocial behaviour. We really did try and make that outreach, because often with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority consultations, they're online and majoritatively are filled out by middle-aged white men. No disrespect to anyone in this room, I value your opinion. But I think trying to get that diversity of voice was where we really put a lot of our attention. And apologies, we would have given it to you if we had it, but this is the process where we're at, and certainly I was hoping that the voice of West Yorkshire and the needs assessment, that is quite a large bit of reading anyway, so I'm hoping that you did manage to get across both of those documents. And of course, please do join in the workshops. You know, this is where it is a collaboration. I do want to hear from you, given all of your experience and your understanding of your communities. So thank you for those comments, and definitely we'll take that away. And hopefully please do engage with the team.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I do welcome the efforts you have put into reach out into the communities that have not been contacted before, so I really appreciate that hard work. And I know you've been to Leeds, every city in the town and every organisation to do your best. So we've got several people who want to ask questions or comments on the plan. Sophie, Richard, and then I'll go with you.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have 2 questions, if that's okay, and I'll give you a brief on both. My first question was actually from the presentation, which I didn't intend to ask, but it kind of came out at me when I was reading through. I personally I'm quite anxious and I'm quite uncomfortable about things being recorded based on feelings rather than facts, and I refer to the misogyny that you've included in hate crime reporting, and it applies to all hate crimes, I suppose, to that extent. It's so prone to inaccuracies or people saying they feel a certain way when it might not actually be the case, and I wondered how you were going to combat that element of the recording of misogyny.
I think that goes across all of hate crime, that if you believe you've been attacked because you are Jewish, that needs to be recorded. If you feel you've been attacked or abused because you're a trans woman, that needs to be recorded as well. I think in recording misogyny and misandry, we can find clusters of behaviours that then we can work with partners, whether that's local councils or police, to try and lower that abuse. It just can't be that there is this acceptance that women in society have to live with groping, abuse because of their gender, being called names, they go out for a run, they're yelled at in the street. This is not going to be something that then will go to court necessarily, but it is absolutely about collating the evidence. Without the numbers, you can't tackle anything. You need the evidence. And West Yorkshire is one of the first, as I said, police forces in the country of its size to record it. But this is going to be the way things are going. Finally, government are also understanding that we need to go further when it comes to abuse and violence against women and girls. So it's not just about gender, it's about hate crime per se. And I don't think it is about feelings, because I think that that if you have been focused and targeted because of your gender, what you wear, or your faith, then that needs to be an element of that relationship with the police, that should be recorded. I don't know, Alison, if you have any further thoughts on that.
Were you talking about the comments that were in the presentation?
No, not specifically, no.
Because I was a bit confused. But obviously, I agree, and I think that people's evidence, so hopefully the plan will talk about people's experience, and that's where the feedback, Voice of West Yorkshire comes in, so we're getting that feedback. But obviously the needs assessment is the data, is the evidence, is the facts. So there'll be 3 documents that comprise this plan, which is the overarching plan, the feelings of people and the feedback of people, and then the evidence and the facts. So if you look at all those 3 documents, then I think that gives a really good evidence base for how people are feeling, but also what the reality is in terms of that. It doesn't take away that feelings are real for those people, and you find people with crime being committed, whether it's being committed on your street in the last 10 days or not, that feeling is real. We need to acknowledge it.
Thank you, Alison. Okay, Sophie?
Yeah, I had a second question, Chair. Yeah. Just on the back of that, my question was how you were going to address the flaws of that. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but referring to your incident, Mayor, with on the train, for instance, there was nothing stopping you to say, whether you felt it or not, that you felt that you were being shouted at because of your gender. And I wanted to hear how you were going to address. And some people say that they feel, if they're asked a question, they answer it because they feel that's the right answer, or that they feel that it would add to the heavy-handedness against the perpetrator. There's all sorts of different reasons people might answer questions the way they do. But I wanted to specifically hear how you were going to address that element. I'll just go on to my second question, Chair. I was really quite disappointed not to see any detail or even mention about how the police and crime plan will interface with the other plans that's within your remit there. So transport, housing, regeneration, etc. How those interlink, because there's a lot of crossover there and overlap of issues. Speeding, as we were mentioning earlier, antisocial behaviour, housing, etc. And I just didn't see any of that there. Has that been considered?
I would hope that you maybe saw that in the presentation, that this is absolutely a public health approach, and as my opening remarks were the opportunity of being there and the input that I have financially on housing and transport and so on, and also working with the police is a gift. And in fact, only the other day I was saying to the Chief Constable that they've got an innovation project, and I have an innovation festival in July and the Mayor's Innovation Prize, and of course we can work together on that to deliver for the people of West Yorkshire. But there is no doubt about it that interconnectivity is one and the same, that transport doesn't sit over here without the safety of the passengers. And so it's objective 4, where it says use the integrated powers of the Mayor to support those vulnerable to criminal behaviour to reduce reoffending, for example, adult skills, employment and housing. Sorry you missed that, but it's absolutely embedded, and that's why I'm saying that this is a great opportunity to listen to the voice of West Yorkshire, hear what they're saying and how they're feeling, and then using my 10 manifesto pledges, cross-cut between police and outcomes, and also those other areas of responsibility, whether that's skills, housing, transport, inclusivity champion. Of course, the inclusivity champion pledge, they will be working really closely with the police. There is a lot of commonality, and that will absolutely be in the next stages of this plan. But thanks for reminding us that it needs to be higher up in the agenda.
Thanks, Chair. I look forward to seeing the detail of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Can I now invite Amanda Carter?
Thank you, Chair. I share Sophie's concern about misogyny, and I hope you will proceed with caution. One example actually is the point I was going to make about burglaries. If you've been burgled or subject of a burglary, you will feel horrifically distressed. It is the most awful thing that can happen to you in your life, and at that time it can be the most awful thing that's happened. And it can leave you feeling frightened of living in your own home. That being said, burglaries have been driven down massively in the last 20 years. And what makes them more high profile is the fact that they're all going around on social media. So at the moment I'm setting up neighbourhood watches as fast as I can in order to make people feel safer. But that is just one point about how people feel, because then other people feel, because somebody else next door has been burned, they feel unsafe as well. And that is just a feeling. They are actually much more safer than they were 20 years ago. However, violent crime is not the same, is it? It's much worse. And the point that the VRU made actually about addictions to alcohol and drugs. Well, what's sitting behind alcohol and drug addiction is actually 99% mental health. And the police are not mental health experts, of course they're not. So they have to refer them to the NHS. The NHS is currently struggling with COVID. As are other countries. We're not alone here, you know, it's happened all over the world. We're all having to struggle with it. And it looks as though it's going to continue on for some time. So the mental health is going to get worse and worse and worse, and people who have got addictive natures will turn to whatever the addiction is. It might be gambling, it might be drugs, it might be alcohol, it might be cups of tea. You know, you're not always addicted to something that's bad for you. But that is something that the police are going to have to face, and how are you going to tackle that in your prison crime plan?
I think having a focus on the pressure the police are under, scooping up the impact of poor mental health in our communities is a comment really of value. And I think in all areas, when it's missing persons, for example, the failures elsewhere, it's the police who pick up the fallout. So it will be absolutely something we're looking at. And that's why the consultation was so important, was to hear the voice of the public, of the people of West Yorkshire, that mental health was something that we were hearing coming back. But of course, addiction and poor mental health is impacted by poverty, it's impacted by trauma. So that's why this whole approach, working with partners in the third sector and social workers and others, to try and work together to get a focus. Now I know that the police have embedded, if I'm correct, Chief, a mental health support member of staff that goes out with the police to identify where it's a mental health crisis rather than potentially a crime or something else, so that they can triage in a way and help the police force. I don't know, Chief, if you would like to just talk through what's actually in place.
Yeah, through the support of mental health trusts, we have mental health nurses and mental health specialists in the dispatch centres who are able to get full records of individuals who are in mental health crisis that the police are going to. And at certain times of the day, in certain districts, we have mental health triage teams, where again mental health nurses are going out with police officers to the event to give greater access to information and advice. We also have a variety of services provided in the cell area. So again, it's all about partnership working, it's all a challenge of funding, and I very much welcome the panel's acknowledgement that the police are picking up much of the work that wouldn't be traditionally seen as crime disorder. So for frontline officers, those patrol officers on the street 24 hours a day, the time is spent on dealing with people in mental health crisis, people who are missing from home, and domestic abuse, in probably virtually equal numbers in terms of time limits. So yeah, we're doing lots of work in partnership. We wish we could do more. It's always difficult with funding, but we very much welcome the mental health trust approach to providing swift access to information.
Thank you, and of course that's what we're doing now, but we will be agile and be able to respond if we find that we have further challenges as whoever knows what's going to happen with COVID. But there will certainly be those who are isolated, lonely, and it just becomes too much. And as I mentioned earlier, also, and you mentioned, people are getting angrier and angrier because they feel out of control in their lives, losing businesses, losing loved ones, not being able to see people, feeling like there's one law for one person and another, you know, that sense that you're not in charge. and that you're doing the right thing, but it's not valued. So thank you for your points, and certainly mental health is something, as the ex-CEO of Touchstone, you know, the large mental health charity, that Alison, I was thinking I'll ask Angela then, actually, but Alison will be leading on, and she will always hold me to account when it comes to mental health.
Thank you, Mayor. Ask Alison. Yeah. Okay, sorry, Sarah, can I, is it on the same issue?
Yes, sorry. So, yeah, thank you. So this is really good to hear about this, and it's really interesting to hear about the mental health triage happening. Will you also be feeding back sort of information through to sort of the mental health services, whether it's voluntary services or provided by the NHS? I know that there's a real issue around sort of mental health and substance abuse, and about the fact that, you know, there's sort of, often people like mental health services don't want to touch people with drug and addiction problems, and drug and addiction services don't want to touch people who've got sort of mental health problems. And there's a real sort of problem in this area about you know, not seeing that actually most people, and I think anybody who works on sort of ground level at this knows that people who have drug and alcohol problems, it's mostly because of either, you know, it is mental health with sort of poverty, or mental health caused by poverty or trauma, and you know, and backgrounds and things like that. So will you also be able to feed that information back to help the sort of pushing to get the agencies to actually be able to work these things together, so that I think the more evidence that we can get to sort of take back to agencies to say, look, these things are not, you can't separate these things out, they are absolutely, you know, go hand in glove together. Will you be able to use that evidence to help that sort of fight against this issue?
Absolutely, and in my role as mayor, it's been brilliant to go and see projects like St Giles's, where they take people with who are on-street drinkers or lifetimes of addictions, and through the work that they do, transform their lives. And actually, the pivotal part of it is to have a safe and secure home, and also to have that support. So, whilst I don't have responsibilities over health, being able to use those soft powers, but actually to be in conversation regularly. I am the bridge between those services, and the Inclusivity Champion is also going to be part funded by the integrated care system. So we've got the health partnership and also the EDI Mayor's Office working together. So absolutely, we will be the bridge between the police and those other partners when it comes to mental health. Great. And where we see the challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you,
and also, there is a new drug strategy that's just been launched by government. I told you earlier it was £30 million in the pot for that. But we're looking at the detail of that drug strategy, and obviously that's going to influence what we do across the whole West Yorkshire with our partners.
Thank you. Okay, last two questions. Paul first, Paul Sullivan.
Time presses, and I think my point has been covered. Thank you.
Pleased to hear that the bell was ringing. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. One of the subjects covered on the women and girls as far as protecting is concerned, one thing that I didn't see was as far as digital protection. Being a dad of a young girl in senior school and being a granddad of a young girl just starting school, what we see on a regular basis, and statistics back this up, is that many girls are that go on to self-harm and even worse, suicide, is often because of their female peers, online bullying, etc., Instagram, Snapchat, and just wondered on the digital side if there was anything in the plan that I've missed, or anything that should be in the plan to protect girls against this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I absolutely understand your anxiety as a parent, and those indicators Instagram, etc., where if you search for suicide rate, you go in the dark, you go further down into the dark pit, when, especially eating disorders is also an issue. I think more and more young children are being almost accidentally exposed to hardcore pornography as well on their phones, aged 11, 12. It's a real issue for all of us as parents and not parents, but for society, that we get a grip of that. Obviously, this is statutory. There is the online harms bill going through Parliament, and that's where we have an opportunity to work and make our case to government that actually those online platforms, when they say they're just the megaphones, actually they're not. They're the publishers, and they have the responsibility and the duty of care that has to be accepted, that the person at the very top must be accountable, because otherwise who is accountable? So I think it's really important that you raise that. Obviously that's a governmental issue. For us in West Yorkshire, I know there is a massive digital team in the police force. It's part of the plan, cybercrime and online crime. Obviously it covers the gamut, doesn't it, from fraud of older people down to young people being groomed, but I also don't think it's girls. There was that terrible case of the young boy that was murdered by a perpetrator who he met online, a smart young boy, parents all over it, they knew what was going on, it sounded like he was a new friend. These perpetrators are very clever as well, and they use the brilliance of the internet to harm young people, but it's not something we're not aware of, and it is mentioned in the plan. But obviously, please do come to the workshops and we can explore that more in more detail.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, we'll conclude on that item. Can we have assurances on timescale of the delivery of plan? Because I know it's not easy, it's been extensive, and it's still getting some responses from the survey, but in terms of timescales and deadlines, it would be helpful for the panel.
Thank you very much, Chair. And apologies, it did slightly slip, but as I say, we were so overwhelmed, we wanted to hear absolutely every voice in West Yorkshire, but I can guarantee the 21st of January, Chair. And thank you to the team, the Herculean effort in what they've done so far.
Thank you, Mayor. To be honest, as a panel member, I am very excited to be part of this police and crime plan and your pledges, and hopefully we will make sure that people of West Yorkshire will feel safer and safer day by day. Thank you. We'll go on to item 9 now. Mayor's response to any current issues.
Thank you. I know time is pressing. Just one thing I'd like to mention that I hadn't is that the West Yorkshire Police is now a white ribbon ambassador, which is something that I'm very pleased about. And also we've, following on from the launch of the National Police Chiefs Council's National Strategy on how forces can support women and girls who are victims of violence and harassment, West Yorkshire Police have their own strategy. And there is a film on social media which starring our one and only Chief Constable John Robbins, so please do share that widely. I know that we are short of time, we've covered an awful lot, so if everyone's happy, I'll end there, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from anybody? From the Chief Constable?
Yes, while we're looking at the accolades, West Yorkshire Police is the 25th most inclusive employer in the country, which I think you'll find is higher than any other local authority council in West Yorkshire.
Well done, thank you, Chief. Thank you. Any comments from anybody else? No? Okay, thank you. Very pleased to hear that. So we will go on to item 10, which is published key decisions. Have you seen the paper? And then we go on to item 11, agreed action log. The paper's in front of you for you to make a note. Anything on that? It's been updated, so we're okay with item 11. Item 12 then, forward agenda. The next meeting will be on agenda, so you've seen all the future dates, and I hope you will make a note of them in your diaries. Item 13, there's no complaints. Pleased to say that. Then item 14, any other business? Trevor?
Chair, just to go back to the forward agenda, because this was supposed to be the final draft of the police and crime plan today. So is that coming back in again?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to mention that in the final bit, but yeah, it's probably better mentioning it now. In the January private panel meeting, there will be two sessions. One will be an open meeting, public meeting, to go through the police and crime plan, and then there will be the second part, which will be private.
Because we've had bits and pieces of it, but we haven't actually had the draft plan yet, have we? So we have that in advance of that meeting. Yeah. And can we have a copy of this one sent electronically to us as well? Thank you.
Yes to both.
Thank you. Okay, so any other business? None. So item 15, next meeting on 21st of January at 10 a.m. Can I thank you, the base team, Chief Constable's team, and the panel members, and everybody's contribution. And thank you, and best wishes for the holiday. Enjoy the time with your families, and keep safe. See you next year.
Thank you, Chair.